Well, let's bring in a retired Air Vice Marshal Sean Bell for some analysis on what's happening in Ukraine. And let's start off, Sean, if we can, thanks for being with us, first of all, on what may be in that £1 billion package.
Yeah, it's a significant additional contribution. I mean, in comparison, it's dwarfed by the US's $40 billion. But the UK is the second largest contributor, so it is significant. The UK to date has been supplying 120 armoured vehicles, over 5,000 NLAW anti-tank weapons, which have had such a decisive effect, and the multi-launch rocket system shown here. The latest package is sophisticated air defence systems. It's also some drones, unmanned air vehicles, which are the eyes and the ears over the battlefield. They can also carry munitions and therefore do precision strike. They're talking about electronic warfare. They probably mean things like GPS jammers and stuff like that, and thousands of additional material, probably clothing and stuff like that. But the weapons alone are no direct use to the Ukrainians. They have to have training for those weapons to make them effective. The UK has been training Ukrainian fighters ever since 2015, and over the last few weeks, over 450 Ukrainian fighters have been out on Wiltshire on the Salisbury Plain ranges, learning how to use the weapons that are being provided. This all takes time, which of course is at a premium, but of course it's a vital ingredient for converting these high technology equipment into credible military capability.
Yeah, I've seen learning how to use artillery pieces by the looks of things there. Fascinating stuff. OK, now, of course, there's been a lot of coverage recently about the amount of money spent on defence spending. Boris Johnson has suggested today that the UK will increase its defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, above what NATO wants at 2%. I mean, how significant an announcement is that, Sean, do you think?
It's very significant, particularly because of the unrest and the different messages that are coming out of the government. As a military man, clearly I welcome any increase in defence spending, particularly because it provides us a more robust and reduces the risk. But of course, the UK does contribute more than the 2% buffer for NATO, and a significant majority of the other NATO countries, there's only a selection shown here, do not meet that 2% margin. As a UK taxpayer like you, we've got the biggest national debt in this country we've had in a generation. NHS is a priority, welfare, cost of living. So there are other priorities, and I can understand why that there are a variety of views about whether defence is a priority. Once the dust settles on all of this, inevitably the UK will conduct a defence review. There will be a review of our national priorities and then decide where defence sits. Interestingly, though, the Prime Minister has announced a rise to 2.5% for GDP for NATO, but he has specifically said by 2030. And what he's done by that is buy some time for the dust to settle. Yep. In the near term, of course, NATO is a team sport, and membership of NATO carries significant benefits. And what we need to see is those nations that are not yet paying their premium paying up.
Yeah, perhaps they will cough up the rest that they should be paying towards NATO. And finally, let's look at the fighting on the ground then, because there's been some activity around Snake Island. That's, of course, in the south, in the just off the city of Odessa, as we can see it there. And just tell us what's been happening around Snake Island in the past few days. Yeah,
it's not really been in the news since the early days of the war. It's 40 kilometres off the coastline of Ukraine, made famous, of course, when the Moskva, before it was sunk, threatened the island's protectors, the Ukrainian protectors, to give up, and the Ukrainian protectors famously, in colourful language, told the Russians to go away. They were captured and Russia took... Why is that important, though? Because it's a tiny island. The main reason is for land, sea and air. From a maritime perspective, the Russians control a major port at Sevastopol and control the Black Sea. From a land perspective, they now control a lot of the coastline around the Black Sea. But from an air perspective, Ukraine still has a lot of control over that sea. If you were to put anti-aircraft missiles on Snake Island, that would have strategic consequences for the whole region. And as a result, that's why Russia have been trying to take it. After Russia invaded, they've been desperately keen to try to establish a military facility there. The trouble is, when the Moskva was sunk, the Russian Navy moved south, out of the way, and that's made it very difficult for them to actually build anything on that island. And every time they do, the Ukrainian has been very effective conducting airstrikes and wiping it out, resulting in huge casualties of Russians. Hasn't hit the news because it's not been on our radar effectively. Only a couple of days ago, the most recent facilities were flattened again by the Ukrainians, and as a result, the Russians have pulled out. Now, Putin claims he's not hampering, the Russians are not hampering the resupply of grain, and as a gesture of goodwill, they're pulling their people out of here. The Ukrainians said it's a victory for us. Now, who knows what the truth is, but the island is shrouded in smoke at the moment, witnessing to some pretty major battles, and it's very hard to see that this isn't a major strategic win for Ukraine.
Right. OK, Sean, do appreciate that analysis. Thank you so much.